Hi, everybody. It is May 19th, 2026. A big news. We're going to study the breaking news in Hormuz. We're going to be studying the Massie versus Trump debate and all of this entire election. It's going to be huge. And it's going to really decide who has the victory. Is it going to be the donors, the APAC money, or is it going to be the American people? Who is going to win between that? Who's your candidate? Are you on Team Trump or are you on Team Massie? Are you on Team Gallerin or are you on Team Massie? Ultimately, we're also going to be studying the markets. We're going to be studying the all of the movements happening in the Strait of Hormuz today, and the Persian Gulf, the maritime traffic, all of the flight traffic, and then we're going to be studying the markets a little bit too and how that's impacting everything. So let's get right into it, and be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe if this gives you the information that you need, and let's dive right in. So again, got to recapture that. We were looking at some Twitter X videos before this. Again, recapture. There we go. Trump considers another big hit on Iran amid peace talks live. So again, when we look at this, President Donald Trump said he was considering another big hit on Iran just a day after he had said he delayed possible strikes following progress on a possible deal to end the war. I hope that we don't have to end the war, but we may have to give them another big hit, Trump told reporters on Tuesday. I'm not sure yet. You'll know very soon. The latest proposal from Iran includes a withdrawal of troops from the areas near Iran, an end to the war on all fronts, including Lebanon, compensation for damage during the conflict, a lifting of sanctions, and an end to the ongoing U.S. maritime blockade, Iran's state media reported. Top Islamic Republic officials in the hours beforehand also said they considered the country's right to enrich uranium non-negotiable. At the same time, Iran also made a statement that they did have the ability to strike nuclear on Israel, which is also a big statement. That was also big. We'll be covering some of those videos later in the episode. Meanwhile, the war with the U.S. and Israel launched on February 28th, and it is becoming increasingly costly and unpopular. Nearly two-thirds of Americans think the war was the wrong decision. What do you guys think? Do you think the Iran war was the right or the wrong decision? Obviously, I don't think it was the right decision personally. A separate poll found over half of the country considered the elevated gas prices resulting from the war a financial hardship, and a quarter of the nation considered the elevated prices as inconvenience. Yeah, that's definitely been impacting things pretty huge. So again, when you look at this, here's a little update of really what we saw today in Hormuz. And then we're going to be covering some of the other stories. We got a lot of big headlines here. And again, we're going to be covering all of it. And it's huge. Okay, at the end of the day, we got a lot of big news. Trump calls off scheduled attacks on Iran amidst serious negotiations towards peace deal. We got a lot of headlines that we're going to go through. J.D. Vance says U.S. remains locked and loaded to restart military campaign as Iran warns of new fronts as it happened. We also have Iran live updates. Trump says he was an hour away from striking Iran. That's pretty crazy. So again, ultimately, where do you think this war is going? The war is going to most likely continue, right? U.S.-Iran war news live updates. Trump holds off Iran attack plan for Tuesday after Gulf intervention. U.S.-Iran war tells us that Israel launched a massive series of airstrikes on southern Lebanon despite an extension of the truce between the two countries. And we're going to be looking at a little bit of that geographical content. I was looking at it last night, and we were able to see a lot of United Nations defense centers that were built all near these locations that appear to be heavily damaged by warfare, whether it was forest fires, whether it was from some kind of missile strikes, and you saw a lot of signs on the ground of essentially bulldozers, and that tells us that a lot of reconstruction could have been happening. And then engineering, all of this stuff, we're going to be looking at the grounds of Lebanon and really how that impacted everything. As far as the Israel-Gaza news goes today, Gaza aid flotilla organizers say all boats intercepted by Israel. Foreign ministers of 10 countries say Israel's storming of the aid flotilla is a blatant violation of international law. Another big story there. More news on Israel. More than 15,800 people killed in Russia's all-out war on Ukraine. That comes from the United Nations. Nearly 800 children are among those killed in Ukraine since Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022, the UN says. Other big headlines that we're going to be covering tonight. NATO considers mission to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Then, as far as our OSINT news goes today, again, Ukraine's prosecutors launch OSINT war crime unit. That's very interesting. Again, all these other headlines here. Maltego acquires online evidence perceiving tool Hunchley to expand OSINT capabilities. Moving on to some other stories here. Death toll from Israel strikes on Lebanon passes 3,000, officials say. Again, yeah, Lebanon's been getting hit hard, and it seems to be Christian villages. And what's even more interesting, we're going to be studying these patterns when we look at all of this. What was interesting to me last night when I was looking at the grounds of southern Lebanon on Google satellite, we were able to really see all of these places that appear to be getting attacked have a UN center right next to it. Now, obviously, we know that proximity does not mean causation. Obviously, we understand that's all very true, but we still have to analyze everything, right? But we're going to analyze it all. We're going to analyze the Strait of Hormuz, analyze all of the marine traffic in the area. What we're looking at today is what's different from yesterday. Really, you're seeing a continued spike of insurers being a little bit scared of this war, it seems. Okay, so we have a lot more clusters. Again, a lot more clusters near Fujairah, which is heavily for tanker insurance companies, and they're not feeling too hot about this war, right? You don't see a lot of flow through the Strait of Hormuz here in any of these fronts. We also have the blockade here that's pretty much taking place. This is what you're seeing on the news today, what you're hearing about on Qasem Island. And then when we kind of look into the Persian Gulf more, we also have then, again, Qatar. We have clusters of these crude oil tankers. We have container shipping, all of these little, and then fisher boats, kind of all patched into these little areas here, right? And again, the IRGC said that they were going to start enforcing a lot more action in the Strait of Hormuz. And then on top of that, when we go north of the Persian Gulf, we have Karg Island, which the EU said that they were going to start really putting more naval vessels in the area. And as we can see, this is a little different than yesterday. We're seeing more traffic coming in around that Karg Island. And what is on Karg Island? Look at these resources. You can tell it is a power plant, right? Lots of nuclear power, lots of energy, and that's really what we're looking at. When you look at the satellites here, this is kind of what we're digging into. This is what Trump wants, ultimately, because geographically this would allow the United States, in their opinion, in our opinion, to change the course of this war and to be able to control that Strait of Hormuz. Right, these different satellite images kind of tell us a story that this seems to be a central hub for power, right? So when you look at all of this, this is what the United States wants, and ultimately the EU and all these different locations and whatnot. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking at in the Persian Gulf when we look at the maps. And then when we look at, again, all of these clusters, we got a lot of anchored tankers. You got a lot of anchored tankers, and all these vessels are kind of sitting here, and that tells us that insurance companies are not feeling hot about where this thing's going. Trump said, he already said that we're going to continue this war, basically. And again, when we look at the Red Sea on the eastern side of Saudi Arabia, we can see that flow through is still going through the Suez Canal up here, which is coming into Port Said. Got a lot of anchored ships over here in the Port Said area. That tells you a lot about, again, how there's not a lot of traffic going there. You know, there's not a lot of traffic going through the Red Sea, which tells us that, again, this is a lot of risk assessment and risk mitigation for these other shipping routes and insurance companies. They're just not willing to get involved. When we look at Israel, again, we have a little bit of increased presence of container shippers and things like that, bulk carriers and whatnot. But they're almost staying far away from Gaza still. You don't see a lot of transport. And again, we just saw that the Israelis had kidnapped, essentially, groups from these Gaza freedom fighters. Okay? And so when we look through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, there still seems to be flow through, but again, there is a tight cluster and a pretty swift line here, which tells us, again, that there seems to be, although there's still traffic going through, they're definitely still feeling the heat, and everybody's a little bit intimidated to get further into this war. And a good way to sense that we are still in a conundrum when it comes to this entire situation. We look at the tip of South Africa, the Cape of Good Hope. You still have all of this maritime traffic going through the southern tip of Africa here in the Cape of Good Hope. Okay? So again, we're going to look more at the maps later a little bit and what's happening in Lebanon. I was looking at that a little bit today, but it is quite scary and shocking just how many UN centers and how far they've made it up. When I was looking at this map, they've made it all the way up northwards, up to from Tyre here, all the way westward to Odessa. Seems to be Israeli territory. everywhere up to here. So they've definitely succeeded in getting that southern front. When we look at a lot of these different, and again, we're going to look at this more later. We're going to look at some of these war zones and how all this works. But they've already made it up to here just about. As you can see, if you were to look at the Google satellites, you'll see a lot of signs that there is definitely a lot of warfare, and they want that southern front of Lebanon, right? So again, Netanyahu and the Netanyahu government is continuing to go forward on that. So again, we also have flight trackers and things like that that we're going to look through, but let's continue where we were at, and let's get right into this Iran war and really what's happening.
President Trump pausing a major attack on Iran at the request of our Gulf allies, but the commander-in-chief is telling the military to be ready on a moment's notice. Jeff Paul is live in Dubai with more. Jeff.
Well, yeah, Brian, there's this overwhelming sense of relief among the folks we've spoken to who call the UAE home. You know, a few days ago, there was a drone attack at a nearby nuclear power plant. And since then, there's just been this growing level of anxiety that the war could once again restart. Well, President Trump putting those concerns to ease, at least for now.
I was asked by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, and some others if we could put it off for 2 or 3 days, a short period of time, because they think that they are getting very close to making a deal. And if we can do that, where there's no nuclear weapon going into the hands of Iran, I think, and if they're satisfied, we will be probably satisfied also.
Yikes. So
President Trump
war
says
goes on.
Serious negotiations are now taking place. In fact, Qatar's foreign ministry spokesperson just said that communication is ongoing between leaders in the region and with, quote, conflict parties to prevent a return to escalation. But President Trump has also told his military leaders to be prepared to go forward with a large-scale assault of Iran on a moment's notice in the event that an acceptable deal isn't reached. But until some sort of peace agreement is signed, Iran remains in control over the Strait of Hormuz.
Appears to be.
All commercial ships still effectively blocked from transiting the strait. Oil prices continue to rise. Crucial supplies of fertilizer are blocked, as well as other critical goods. In some areas of the world, there are now deep shortages of fuel. The United Nations says this is a huge problem for the entire world, and that the basic need and basic need for freedom of navigation must be restored.
We want to make sure that there's no constraint.
So again, when we looked at the maritime traffic on marinetraffic.com, then you will be able to identify that a lot of the shipping routes and trade routes are being heavily impacted. And at the end of the day, that's impacting a lot of the entire global market. It's impacting food prices. It's going to impact gas prices. It's going to impact wartime LNG, which is liquefied natural gas. All of this kind of transport that's affecting the entire world. Okay, and then fuel shortages. All of these things are going to be impacted. So pretty much all the costs on everything are going to be going up across the entire planet. It's going to affect the economy, almost everything from what we're looking at on the maps.
To freedom of navigation on the high seas and on the Strait of Hormuz. And so we don't want any particular entity to restrict that freedom of access.
Now, while there is this feeling of relief for the folks who call some of these Gulf Arab countries home, they are a bit cautious. We have been here before where there was an attack sort of plan and then it was called off to let negotiations go on. Time will tell whether this time is different. Brian?
All right. Thanks so much, Jeff.
So again, it does look like this Iran war is absolutely going to continue when we look at everything Trump's been saying, and when we look at all of this geopolitical news, it appears clear as day. We also have a lot of the stories from Thomas Massie. Forgot to mention that we'll be talking about that a lot. I mentioned it a little bit at the beginning of the episode. But again, when we look at all of the current news today, there's definitely a lot that's impacting the market. Okay, we also have Ukraine and the Russia latest. China says claim that President Xi told Putin he'd regret invasion is a complete fabrication. China has denied that the President Xi Jinping said Vladimir Putin would regret this invasion of Ukraine during a wide-ranging talks with President Trump during his visit to Beijing last week. And then again, when we look at the Taiwan explained why China claims it and why the U.S. is involved, we see that a lot of this is coming to a helm here, right? China wants that market because they believe that they are controlling they want to control that semiconductor market. So China's going to be really trying to control Taiwan. That's going to be a big it's a big movement for them. Also tonight, some of the biggest news we honestly have is Thomas Massie versus Ed Gallerin. and Ed Gallerin's already being predicted to essentially win. Yeah, look at that, 94% to 1%. That just tells you how controlled all of this is. That's crazy. Okay, and so I don't think that's actually true. We're going to see how it turns out tonight, but poly market, who knows? This is why you got to be careful on what you're betting on, right? Trump came back on Twitter today. Trump also returned to the X algorithm, and he made a statement about Thomas Massie. This was actually maybe about an hour ago, about 4 o'clock p.m. Okay, maybe not an hour ago. But horrible Congressman Thomas Massie put out an old endorsement from many years ago of him by me long before I found out that he was the worst congressman in the history of our country. I endorsed Ed Gallerin, a true American patriot, which Massie knows full well. So the statement that he has put out is fraudulent, just like he is fraudulent. Withdraw your fake statement, Massie, right now. President Donald J. Trump. So again, Donald Trump returned to Twitter X, and this is kind of crazy, right? He's returned to Twitter X today specifically just to go after Thomas Massie because he knows the masses of America First and MAGA are all on X. Okay, and then you have a lot of these people saying your last post here was 2 months ago. You came back just to help remove a congressman from rural Kentucky because he pushed for the release of the Epstein files, opposed war with Iran, and voted against sending billions to Israel. Massie will win. You are a traitor. You are a traitor to the American people. GTFO. The words true American patriot coming out of your Jewish mouth is laughable. I mean, yeah, it's true. You're definitely acting like it. You have betrayed your base. MAGA has turned into MEGA, make Israel great again. Good luck with being owned by your Jewish and Zionist donors. I'm out. So this is what a lot of people are saying on X when we look at some of these responses. And I share a lot of the same sentiments. I mean, it's pretty, you look at the favorability of Thomas Massie here, and it's huge. Everybody wants Thomas Massie, right? At least on X, and Truth Social is maybe just about the only place that you will actually find a lot of the pro-Trump kind of movement, right? I try to post on there, but, you don't get a lot of likes when you're not kissing the president's butt, okay? But honestly, at the end of the day, we're against this Iran war. We're against endless wars. We're not against the Zionists because of no reason. It's because the Zionists got America involved in this war. They own our entire Congress. They obviously own our president. And this was what Donald Trump said. Again, that was from his Truth Social. We kind of already read that. And this is what Thomas Massie had said in response.
Trump wants you to lose.
Have you met your match?
No, I'm not running.
Just to clarify, this wasn't what he said to respond, but this was at 12:11 p.m., just a few hours before Donald Trump made that Truth Social statement.
Running against President Trump. Most of the people voting for me support President Trump like I do. And so the endorsements that I've gotten are from the pro-life groups, the pro-Second Amendment groups, because my opponent, he won't debate, he won't fill out the forms to say where he is on abortion, where he is on gun control. And so I've also got the local elected leaders and the state reps endorsing me. I've got U.S. reps from Congress coming to my district and campaigning with me because I'm the conservative and I'm running against an AI candidate without the I. He's created AI ads. He does his social media posts with AI. And he hasn't been to a single debate. He skipped all 8 of them. He's terrified of debating. And people don't know who he is. There's no enthusiasm for him. I did 3 events yesterday. Each of them, every one of them, had more attendees than the Secretary of War's event. That tells you where the polling's at. They're panicked because the president's done.
They were so panicked that they went and changed Polymarket and the entire prediction. That Polymarket prediction was at 61% for Ed Gallerin, and now it's at like 91%. Like, oh, come on.
11 posts about this race in the last 72 hours, and they sent the Secretary of War. Their polling shows the same thing as mine. We're probably going to pull this off.
We'll see what happens. We will see what happens. If Thomas Massie wins, we will know that the favor of the American people is winning. If Ed Gallerin wins, then I think we are going to see a lot more favorability towards the donor class, and the media will spin it that way. They will say that Donald Trump can never be defeated. Donald Trump is the king of the Republican Party, and anybody who goes against Trump will be destroyed. And so you look at all of that, and it's pretty evident to see where things are going, right? So when we look deeper into what's kind of happening with Thomas Massie and Donald Trump, this is from The Hill. Rove, Hemmer label Massie race a referendum on Trump. There is a risk. Republican strategist Karl Rove and journalist Bill Hemmer on Monday both agreed that the outcome of the primary election in Kentucky will speak volumes to GOP incumbents on President Trump, ups his efforts to oust Representative Thomas Massie. Massie is vying to hold onto his seat in the state's 4th congressional district against Ed Gallerin, a retired Navy SEAL who nabbed Trump's endorsement. I see this race every bit as much as about President Trump as Massie and Gallerin, Hemmer said during an episode of Fox News' American Newsroom. Rove said that there was a clear divide between Gallerin and Massie, noting that one was the Trump guy and the other is not. He also highlighted 2 risks from the outcome of the highly contested primary in the bluegrass state. One is it expends a lot of resources in battle inside the party that could be spent on general election, Rove said. And second of all, there gets to be a point where people say, Mr. President, I don't need to be with you 100% of the time. Look, there were people who voted against the Bush agenda. One of them was an Indiana congressman who voted against the prescription drug benefit. The strategist continued. His name was Mike Pence, but we would no more have thought about going after Mike Pence on that than the man on the moon, because you're going to need that voter another day. Rove added that the threat of being ousted increases the chances of lawmakers breaking with the party on crucial votes. We saw this earlier this year, Senator Tom Tillis said. In the Senate, for example, said, "Okay, I'm not running for a re-election." The president made it clear that if I did, he wasn't going to be for me, so I'm free. And what I'm going to do is give him a heartburn on the issue of the Federal Reserve Chairman, he said. So when we look at all of this, a lot of this is just politics and political rhetoric. But ultimately, who do you think is going to win? Right? Do you think Donald Trump is going to pull this off and basically oust Thomas Massie from the Republican Party as the Kentucky candidate? Or do you think Ed Gallerin is going to pull it off? And do you think the MAGA movement is going to stay loyal to Trump? Ultimately, I don't really see that happening. Only because what have the American people really gotten out of this Iran war? And, we never got the Epstein files. We never got anything that we were promised as Republicans, right? So you have to think about that. Can Massie remain standing even as the other Trump enemies fall? Next stop on President Donald Trump's revenge tour is Kentucky, on the heels of ousting several Indiana state lawmakers early this month and Senator Bill Cassidy just days ago. The White House is well positioned to remove rebellious Representative Thomas Massie in Kentucky's GOP primary. It's only one of the final checkpoints in Trump's month-long effort to punish Republicans for bucking him, and the list of Massie's sins is long, from his opposition to the president's signature tax and spending plan to his resourceful stands against the war in Iran and successfully pushing for the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files. Trump is coming in as the leader of the party, and he has every right to flex his muscles, said Shane Noam, who is neutral in the race as the chair Kenton County Republican Party in Massie's district. The question remains, will the average Joe Republican lean into the party, or will they lean into an outsider who's been in the party for 14 years? The Kentucky Libertarians' fate is the biggest in the slate of tests on Tuesday as Trump's grip on the GOP continues. In Georgia, the Trump-backed gubernatorial candidate seems likely to advance to a runoff, while Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who refused to accept the president's endorsement to overturn the 2020 election results, is polling in third place. In Alabama, Trump's endorsement of Representative Barry Moore in the GOP Senate primary helped boost him in front-runner states. The president's endorsement has proven to be decisive in GOP primaries and a mobilizing force from his base. A political poll conducted by the Public First from May 9 to 11 found that nearly half the voters who plan to vote Republican in the midterms would choose a candidate officially endorsed by President Trump, compared with a candidate Trump hasn't endorsed but is opposed to, 28%, or a candidate he's actively trying to block, 9%. Trump and his allies have had some major recent successes in taking out president's foes. They spent more than $9 million to pick off 5 state lawmakers who opposed his redistricting push in Indiana. In Louisiana, Trump lent the influence of his social media account to boost Representative Julia Letlow early on in the race, and State Treasurer John Fleming in the final hours. But no one has drawn the ire of Trump and his team quite like Massie. The president's endorsement of former Navy SEAL Ed Gallerin united local force and various fractions of the GOP in trying to sink the iconoclast Kentucky conservative with a libertarian lean. Spending the race has topped $32 million, making it the most expensive House primary in history per tracking from Ad Impact. Trump's political operation and pro-Israel groups who have long opposed the incumbent have unleashed more than $16 million against him. What does that tell you? That tells you AIPAC and these Israelis and the Zionists completely control the Republican Party and they completely control MAGA. I think all of this could not be more obvious as an analyst myself. That's just my opinion, and that's just what I'm seeing. Trump rallied with Gallerin in March, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth promoted him at an event in the district on Monday. So why is this happening, right? Why is this happening? So this is what Marjorie Taylor Greene had to say about it. What do you guys think about Marjorie Taylor Greene? A lot of people have different opinions on her, but I think she's pretty great. I think she is a patriot, and I think she's got good plans for America overall. It's too bad that she ended up resigning from Congress personally.
So I just saw a video where President Trump is claiming that Thomas Massie votes for men and women's sports and votes for transing kids and all of this insane garbage that the president is unfortunately lying about Thomas Massie. And here's a quick story for you guys. I thought this was worth sharing. President Trump is going this week, actually, to Mike Lawler's district in New York in support of Mike Lawler. Well, here's some facts. Mike Lawler hated Donald Trump, hated him when he was running for president. Used to make fun of him all the time, mocked him, would come up and make fun of me for supporting the president. Well, I thought you guys should know, if you really want to know about voting records, it was Mike Lawler and 3 other Republicans that voted no to my bill, Protect Children's Innocence Act, that actually makes it a felony to perform gender-affirming care on children, anybody under the age of 18, which, by the way, is one of the president's executive orders.
And remember, Donald Trump had switched all of this. He went from being against the transgender surgeries. He says he's against them today, but he had just put out a Truth Social statement, and then he ended up deleting it because it got so much negative feedback. But Trump had literally said that, oh no, now you can do transgender surgeries with your parents' consent. And it was just like, whoa, and everybody kind of backed up, and they were like, what's going on, Trump? You know? And so she's absolutely right about what she's saying here.
It's a big deal to President Trump. Well, Mike Lawler voted no to my bill, which is taking a hard stance against President Trump and his executive order. And Thomas Massie voted yes for my bill, which is in support of President Trump's executive order and in support of stopping gender-affirming care, transing of children. So the more you know, the more truth you hear, the better you are able to see exactly what's going on.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. 100%. That's absolutely true. Got to just get rid of some of these tabs. We're glitching out a little bit here. Want to keep this going. Thomas Massie for Congress. Is this the real one? So again, this was the endorsement of Congressman Thomas Massie back on May 10th of 2022. This is at 411. So this was in response to what Donald Trump had said over here. Horrible congressman, that kind of tweet. And Thomas Massie came right back at him and basically showed him. So again, it seems like a lot of the people are in favor of Thomas Massie, right? 19 million views Trump had on his tweet, 99,000 likes. And Thomas Massie, 683,300 views, 51,000 likes. So he's already like catching up to Trump. If you look at the ratio of likes, Thomas Massie seems to be winning. But Polymarket would tell you, no, that's not true. So who knows? Who knows what's going to happen with all of that? What do you think is going to happen with all of it? Ultimately, I think it's going to be pretty, it's going to be tight. It's going to be tight. It's going to be a big night. We're going to see what happens. Will the American people have the favorable vote here, or is it going to be the Ed Galligan candidate? What do you think is coming? Oh shit! I think I just closed out all my tabs. That's great. Well, I just closed out all my tabs. That's like awesome. Well, I guess we got to pull them back up here. Well, I guess we're going through X because I had all these tabs and I accidentally just clicked close all tabs. So that's just awesome. So love that. Love when things just don't go right. So ultimately, let's look at some of the bookmarks and some of these other tweets that were going big. We'll look at some of the traffic too. We're going to look at the maritime traffic a little bit more soon. On the bright side, this should have a little bit better quality going through this stream. Sorry about that. Raise your hand if you think Spencer Pratt is the only option Los Angeles has to be saved. I definitely think he needs to win. A lot of people are pretty in favor of Spencer Pratt, and I think he's doing a pretty good job, especially for somebody who's never really been in politics. So Oren Schroyer said something earlier on X today as well. Massie wins, much needed moral boost. Hope remains we can save the country politically. Americans can defeat donors and lobbyists. If Massie loses, morale bottoms out. Conservative voters stay home. Hope dwindles. There's any political options left. Donor class owns our country. Yeah, so I think that's absolutely true. Okay, so when we look at that, that's absolutely happening. No Limit on X also posted, holy shit, the highest level in almost 20 years. Do you know what this means? Yeah, maybe a stock market crash is imminent. Thought this was interesting. You have Prime Minister Netanyahu here. And what does he have over that camera? He's got something blocking those cameras, right? He's got some tape blocking the cameras. Very Mark Zuckerberg of him. And why is that? Well, it's because a lot of people forget that with your iPhone, you have malware that can basically tap into your cameras and watch you at all times and get that kind of information without you even knowing it. Same thing with your voice recorder on that. So that's very interesting. So again, let's look at some of the oil prices and how this has been impacting things. Again, I got to pull up all of these tabs again because I totally accidentally logged out of everything. So WTI crude is sitting today at $104.10. Brent crude is at $111.30. Merben crude is at $107.30, and natural gas is sitting up now at $3.11. So again, prices are going up. The prices are going up for oil. So who knows what's going to happen with that. When it comes to Coinbase, we also have, or Coin Market Cap, a lot of big news. At the end of the day, the Clarity Act is going to be, we're waiting on July 4th for the Clarity Act in Bitcoin and crypto, essentially with XRP and Ethereum, Solana, all these great tokens. Fear and Greed Index is at 39. We were at 56 last week. But ultimately, I still think people are just waiting on that Clarity Act. We're going to see if this thing actually makes a difference or if it's just going to be a lot of FUD, right? If it's going to be a lot of hopium. What do you guys think about that? But this is what the market's looking like for crypto right now. And at the end of the day, we're doing pretty decent. But ultimately, I also wanted to look at the marine traffic that was happening in the Strait of Hormuz. Definitely wanted to give that another look, and let's kind of look at that again. So again, when you look at a lot of the activity in the Strait of Hormuz, it's important to notice all of the congestion and all of the clustering happening, again, right near Fujairah, which is right here where you see this cluster here. And this is where a lot of insurance companies, for tankers, tanker insurance companies, they like to dock here when there's a lot of unpredictability with war times and wartime measures like that. So it's definitely something to pay attention to, everything that's happening here in the Strait of Hormuz. Ultimately, you got to be careful, right? We don't really know what's happening, but what we can tell is a story from all of the activity happening in the Persian Gulf today and all of the anchorage, right? You have a lot of these, crude oil tankers and shipping containers. You have these bulk carriers. All these kinds of vessels are running through the Strait of Hormuz. You have increased access. It looks like you have more fleets heading towards Karg Island. Yesterday, this was pretty empty and hollow around here. Again, you got mostly Iranian vessels here that are pretty much guarding the area, multi-purpose offshore vessels. So you have a lot of those kind of things. But again, we also have Starline crude oil tanker that was there since yesterday. But again, if you look at the movement and the direction of some of these fishing crafts and things like that, you can tell maybe there's some more activity that they're not wanting us to know about, right? Unspecified, so maybe that's a military ship there. Another unspecified, so these could be vessels right here. Okay, so when you look at all of these different, you look at all of the activity, Iran is putting all of their bunkers or all of their vessels all the way near Karg Island because they know that the United States wants that. At the same time, you have a lot of activity in the Red Sea. You have some movement happening. And again, you have the Royal Evolution passenger ship and things like that. Everything is still flowing through the Red Sea, but it's a little bit slower activity right now. And again, it looks like there's a little bit more trade happening in this area, but it's a little bit, it's definitely still limited. So everybody, and including those insurance companies, they're feeling a little bit worried about where things might be going with this. Again, people are staying in one line. So again, they're staying away from some of these areas because a lot of those mines have been putting out there. A lot of people are worried about these drone strikes that we've been hearing from the IRGC putting those out. And again, who knows what's going to happen? But we have a lot of docking and anchorage over at Port Said. Again, a lot of tanker insurance companies are here, and you're going to see a lot of these kind of things, and you got to be able to pay attention to that. And then when you look over to the southern tip of Africa, a lot of that traffic is still congested over here. That's pretty much a good indicator that they're not able to go through that Red Sea, or they don't want to go through the Red Sea. They don't want to risk getting bombed, and at the end of the day, they are trying to remain within Iran's news. So a lot of look at that. Look at all that traffic going around Africa just to get to those locations. And that's why this is telling a story of how the economy is pretty much taking a massive hit right now because of all of this. Okay. So again, what I did want to look at a little bit and show you guys was some interesting stuff I had found on the southern Israeli border. Okay. So when you look at the southern Israeli border, you have these little UN stations. And why is that? And everywhere you look near these UN stations, something I noticed yesterday when I was looking, you're seeing all this kind of activity that appears to be a lot of warfare, bombings. You have some reconstruction sites here. Again, you can tell there was bulldozers here. You got you got an op lab here. Like, what is that, right? And then when you look a little further, you can see that there's literally smoke from these forest fires that are being set in Lebanon, southern Lebanon. All these little new roads that have been built. Kind of crazy. And these happen in all across the southern border of Lebanon. We can find these little UN centers, right? And again, proximity does not mean causation. We understand that in OSINT. That's very important to know. But we have to take notice that everywhere where you see these locations, you're seeing a lot of activity in battleground. Now, South Lebanon against, again, Hezbollah, Iran, Israel, they've been kind of at war for like at least a decade now. So that's why you're seeing a lot of these UN centers that were placed here strategically for what they call defense. I just find it interesting that when you look at all of these UN centers, yeah, I remember seeing this one. You look at all these different UN centers, got a lot of helipads here, a lot of locations on these UN centers. But always right next to them, you see a lot of activity when it comes to military and what looks like there could have been bombings, right? So when we look at these villages, we can tell that there's rubble everywhere. You can see the buildings have been destroyed in these areas. You can see a lot of vegetation change in the topography. You have a lot of new earth that we're seeing, which tells us that, again, there was a lot of excavation, engineering, you could call it. But ultimately, a lot of these are, from missile strikes, drone strikes. You got a lot of buildings that have been kind of collapsed. See, you could see from these little trees here that these are all gone, okay? And you got little patches of trees here. So again, you could also see these buildings that are kind of pillaged, okay? And this kind of follows all over. You got smoke, and whether that, some people might say, oh, those are clouds. Well, the reason you know that they're not clouds is because you got a dark coloration of the clouds. Okay, this is more of a cloud right here, and we don't even know. That could be something completely different. Okay, so all across southern Lebanon, you'll see these little UN centers, and we'll find them all over these areas. All over. So again, big areas that have been pretty much anywhere where you zoom in on Lebanon, you can find warfare, signs of missiles, bam, right here, bam. This was a whole structure that's been removed and or destroyed. And then as you keep kind of investigating, some of these buildings and structures are still up, but you're looking at a lot of these that have been pretty much blown to bits. Okay, kind of interesting to look at that. And again, always near these locations, you'll find these little UN centers. You just got to look hard for it, and you got to look in the right places. Okay, so I kind of forgot where some of these were. You'll find them everywhere if you look hard enough. And again, this kind of just goes on and on and on throughout the southern border of Lebanon. Okay, so as we continue looking here, we'll see more of these popping up. Okay, so where was it? Where was one that I was looking for yesterday? So again, this is an area that looks like it has been pretty much a war zone for a long time. You have all these different areas. Pretty crazy to see everything that's going on when it comes to this southern border. And over here, this is like a whole village that's been destroyed. Ale Quran Mosque. Look at that. So this is what a war zone essentially looks like. A successful war zone, you could call it, by the Israelis, I would say. More of the Israelis. and Hezbollah has been trying to fight against Israel. But at the end of the day, Israel's just taking down everybody. Ultimately, they're taking down everybody. They're taking down all these Christian villages. You can call them Christian, you can call them Arabic, whatever you want. At the end of the day, the point is that why don't we know what's happening more? How come we don't hear more about this? Okay, and then boom, there you go. You find a UN center right here, right next to it. And you see this all over southern Lebanon. All of these UN centers are strategically placed right next to all of these war zones. And I think it's quite interesting when you look at that. It's something to pay attention to, right? A lot of different signs of that topography, a lot of signs of warfare and things like that. But pretty crazy. You got these UN centers everywhere, and pretty much these are run by different countries, of course. It's not one country that runs these UN centers. They're run by Ireland and Finland and Canada and lots of different stations like Italy, Finland. A lot of these different countries are really running these places. But look, total pillaging everywhere you look across that southern border, and we know that that's been happening. But people are saying that, oh, no, that's not happening. Well, it is. Then you have strategically some of these places that have been left in. But everywhere you look across the southern border, you're seeing this kind of activity, right? So if we just keep going, we can keep finding more of these all across the southern border. Just kind of got to look, and when you look in the right places, you'll be able to find them. You really got to pay attention. Wherever you see signs of a war, see, that could have even been one right there, just based on the structure. It kind of looks like it could have been one, but maybe not. As you look at all of these, you can kind of see, maybe this was one. Can't remember. I had all of these lined up. There we go. That's what I was looking for. It's UNP 121. And then when we look in the nearby areas, why is that? Why is that? Why is it right next to these UN centers, these United Nations centers? Is there a possible reason? Is the United Nations working as a proxy, or are they actually trying to defend, ultimately, at the end of the day? So again, we can't say proximity equals causation, because that's not true. But it is interesting to me. All of these warfare, all of these war zones that you can clearly see, buildings collapsed, destroyed, and then there's always a UN center right next to it, for whatever reason. Obviously, we know that a lot of that's for defense, but that's what they keep telling us. And is there something more that we don't know, that they don't want us to know? Maybe there are more players working hand in hand with Israel. Look at this. Completely destroyed. Again, this is the border of southern Lebanon. Completely destroyed. Completely destroyed. Everything in the area that you can see. Wiped out. So, why aren't they telling us this information, and why are they trying to hide it? And most importantly, how come you find a UN center? There it is, painted right on the rooftops. You can see it. It says it right here, UNP 542. And it's always right near a war zone. And so again, oh yeah, they strategically placed those there because of all the attacks that are happening. Here's another village that's basically been destroyed. Battle of Eta Ashab. But this is what we're dealing with. So this is kind of the area. And this is what they don't want you to know. And I bet you if we keep looking, we'll find a UN center real close to this. Kind of just keep looking around. Keep scanning the sectors, and you'll be able to see it. You'll be able to find it. But you'll find them all around. Very interesting. I wouldn't want to spend too much more time on this, but I think you get the point. The more that you kind of look at these battle zones where you see these war zones, you see these forest fires that are being set, you can see signs of that, you'll find these UN centers strategically placed. It's kind of like finding where's Waldo? You know, but eventually you'll find them if you just look hard enough. And again, we're just looking on the southern border of Lebanon. Again, sorry, we had a bunch of tabs that we were going to look through. We had a bunch of stories and articles that we were going to look through, but ultimately, oh, that's interesting. What's that? What is that over here? That's really strange. What do they not want us to see here? I don't remember seeing this. So when you look at that kind of stuff, though, it's very interesting. Again, boom. So you see all these war zones, you see all these buildings destroyed, and then you have the UNP 520 here. Completely different center. Okay? And what will you find near it? You have an OLAS school, Remaik, the Monastery of Our Lady. And then you kind of look around Let's look for some war zone. Let's look for some battle activity. Let's look for some war grounds. I'm sure you'll find something. It's always near these UN centers. You'll find some activity. Got to be really careful about what you're looking at. There's always something if you look hard enough. A lot of this stuff, we've already seen some interesting stuff in this area, right? Some of this is very interesting because it's like, what do they not want you to see right there? That's interesting. So when we look at all of it, that's kind of what we're looking at. You can look more into that. This is maritimetraffic.com. This is kind of what I've been looking at to check out the southern border. Again, I probably found at least 20 of these UN centers all the way northward up from Tyre over here. There's one over here, I believe, if I remember correctly. Just got to find it. But you'll find these little UN centers, again, strategically located where all these battlegrounds basically are, where you see a lot of warfare and where you see signs of, buildings being destroyed and pillages, things like that. So really interesting at the end of the day. Where do you see this war going? Who do you see winning the war? Ultimately, I think it's pretty wild when you see all of it. And when you actually zoom out and you see what's going on. And again, what does that tell you? Odessa sign, Odessa, Israel observation point. That's interesting. And then you look up here, look at all of that. All gone, destroyed. And you see more war zone. So again, all the way upwards north from Tyre on the east coast of Lebanon, and then on the west border of Lebanon, you have the Odessa Israel observation point, and then all of these bombings. And if you look close enough, where was it? I'm going to try to find that UN center that I found here the other night. Again, crazy. This is what it looks like from a satellite view. If many of you haven't seen what a war zone looks like from satellite view, that's what it looks like. Pillaging everywhere, buildings destroyed. You have signs of bulldozers and construction and engineering and things like that. Even got some tanks here. Look at that. Found some tanks. So these are literally tanks that we're looking at right now. We might have just caught this right after the war, right after some kind of warfare had happened. So that's interesting. All of these buildings destroyed. So the question lies, what's up with the UN and all of these little stations being placed right nearby? If you look hard enough, you can usually find them. You got to zoom in at a right amount or it won't show up. So that's kind of why I'm still scanning the area. Can't remember exactly where I found that little location. But this is what we're dealing with. This is the state of 2026, and this is Lebanon. Pretty much middle Lebanon. Take a look at that. So let's zoom out one more time. So Odessa. We were right here. So from all the way up here is pretty much what I've been noticing. Actually, right up to Nabateh is really where I've seen a lot of the Israeli activity, and it seems like there's been a lot of warfare over here. So pretty much right where my cursor is, that's where you've been seeing a lot of warfare happening. And also a good indicator of that is that you don't have a lot of traffic coming into this area. So what are they really planning, right? What are they really planning? Going to look more into that at a later point, but don't want to spend too much time on it. Ultimately, that's what we're looking at in regards to the maritime traffic, the geographical ground movements, and everything we're seeing with the Israel war and whatnot. That's kind of what's going on there, okay? So ultimately, again, we were also going to look at the stock market. Stock market today. I had to reopen all of these articles. S&P 500 posts third straight losing session as rising yields drag down stocks. These are the live updates. Stocks closed lower Tuesday with the S&P 500 posting its third straight losing session as a jump in bond yields threatened the bull market. Traders also monitored the oil market following President Donald Trump's cancellation of planned attacks on Iran. The S&P 500 closed down 0.67%, ending at $7,353.61, while the Nasdaq Composite finished 0.84% lower at $25,870.71. The Dow Jones Industrial Average shed 322.24 points, or 0.65%, to close at $49,363. So pretty big stories, pretty big news. So again, as we kind of look back into the Twitter X algorithm, analyzing everything that's going on. Again, if you like GTA 5, this is the real GTA 5. This is from Special Ops Magazine. This is the up close and personal with the newest model 160th SOAR Little Bird, the AH-6R. So again, if you guys like military tech out there, and if you guys like GTA 5, that's the real thing. Pretty cool, pretty powerful. Polish special forces are not messing around if it comes to eliminating foreign spies and threats. So again, the Poles are leading the way. I think this is how we should handle illegal immigrants, quite personally. I mean, if you're not going to be in the United States legally, then why should you be able to stay here in America? Why don't we handle illegal immigration this way? This is what ICE could have done and could have accomplished, but instead, Donald Trump tacoed. Trump always chickens out. He tacoed, and we lost that ability to enforce that. In Minneapolis, we could have enforced that everywhere. Los Angeles, all of these places. Seattle, Portland, Seattle, I mean. All of these different locations. But instead, we allow our country to be overrun by illegal immigration. Not good, not good. Justin, U.S. DOJ announces a 15-city nationwide anti-Semitism awareness and action tour to increase reporting of anti-Semitism, strengthen collaboration between local and federal law enforcement and Jewish communities, and foster broad interfaith opposition to anti-Semitism among Jews, Baptist Christians, Catholics, and Muslims. So again, more enforcement of the anti-Semitism laws, and you're basically never allowed to question Israel. That's kind of how that goes. You're an anti-Semite if you question the war with Iran. You're an anti-Semite if you question the state of Israel. You're an anti-Semite if you say that AIPAC runs our government. You're not allowed to say any of this stuff, but it is true. And we have to look objectively at that, and it just is, okay? And that's just something that really can't be debated. This is from the Hodge twins. Wish they went after Epstein pedos like they are going after Massie. Seriously, why didn't we go after the Epstein and the Epstein class, the Epstein crime syndicate? They're actually trying to convince you that this guy is a Democrat. That's how dumb they think you are. If you live in Thomas Massie's district in Kentucky, go vote for one of the only real conservatives in Washington, D.C. today. 100%. He's pro-gun, he's Second Amendment, and he's voted 91% with the Democrats, 91% with the Republicans on a lot of big issues. So again, this is from Cynthia Loomis on the Clarity Act and how important that really is.
First of all, Senator Cynthia Lummis's Digital Asset Market Clarity Act has passed out of committee with bipartisan support, now headed for full vote on the Senate floor. And she joins us now to tell us more. Wyoming Senator Cynthia Lummis. And first of all, before we even start the conversation, the audience needs to know, you've been at this for a long time. You've always found a way to have bipartisan help with this. 2022 with Senator Gillibrand, the Responsible Financial Innovation Act. Again in 2023, again in 2025. You pulled it over the finish line. What's next?
Has to pass in the Senate now.
We're going to take the bill that we passed in the Senate Banking Committee last week. We're going to combine it with the bill that's already passed the Ag Committee in the Senate, which deals with the Commodity Futures Trading Commission part of this subject. Then we're going to wrap in some language about ethics, as well as make some technical changes to the Genius Act. So then we're going to put it all together and present it on the Senate floor, hopefully sometime this summer.
Well, I've heard July 4th was going to be the next markup date, so we'll see if that's actually true, but it'll definitely be a big, big day. More on Thomas Massie. This girl had a lot to say about it, and listen to what she had to say. I agree with a lot of this. And, okay, there we go.
4th Congressional District, and I'm very surprised here that the polls close at 6 p.m. Eastern. That does give a leg up to the brainwashed boomer generation that sit and watch Fox News and listen to AM radio and the sound bites that are defamatory and 100% false. It's no wonder they think Massie has turned his back on America. But you hear lies like he voted to fund transgender surgery for minors. No, he didn't. But you know who did? Every single person that voted for the big, beautiful bill Massie voted no
I
because
just love
he's
that
not
people are
for
saying it.
omnibus bills. He's for single issue bills. And every time President Trump says, Massie's a grandstander, and he voted no on this, and he voted to defund DHS. No, he didn't. He's actually for border security and highly supports it. But when you sneak it in a bill with other unconstitutional aspects and other items, see, when you have good things in bills and there's a lot of poison in it, you've just tainted the whole bill. You have to understand the whole narrative around Massie, who's been loved. There's a reason there's people from all over the country here. It's because Thomas Massie is a beacon of liberty. He is the bat signal. He's adopted many of us around the country, and he represents us on the federal level. So the polls do close in 2 hours. I'm willing to accept any outcome because basically the Republican Party loses either way. Because if Massie wins, it shows you that Trump has lost control of his base that he abandoned. And if Massie loses, you've pissed off a huge faction of people who are already going to walk away from the Republican Party. And we're ready for anything, but we're sweating out here. We're doing everything we can. So just please remember to get the youth votes out there. He's absolutely dominating in every demographic except for the boomers. And AIPAC knew what they were doing, throwing money into those ads, because the younger generation watch podcasts. They don't get their news from the lamestream media. So it's in the hands of we the people who actually wake up and go out and vote, who don't allow them to be brainwashed or controlled by a foreign agent. So this veteran is ready to walk away if Thomas Massie loses, and I will just smile with sarcasm if that happens, and I hope he doesn't.
How many of you guys feel the same?
My oath is to the Constitution, not a person or a party, and I will just continue to elevate liberty candidates and hopefully break apart this uniparty system.
At the end of the day, I mean, I don't want to break apart any system, but at the end of the day, what we do need to do is break apart the, foreign lobbies that are destroying our country and occupying our entire government and all of our politicians. All of that needs to happen, And Thomas Massie, he's been talking against, Thomas Massie has been the most pro-America candidate that we've had in a long time, at least in the state of Kentucky. When you look at, he's pro-Second Amendment. Thomas Massie is also... again, he's been the one trying to release the Epstein files, standing up for those victims and whatnot, trying to find the truth there. And at the end of the day, he's also been against this Iran war. And so you can bet for every single reason, the reason they're going after Massie is because he's been standing for these specific issues. And Trump doesn't, that's not good for Trump, right? So at the end of the day, this is going to be Jewish Zionist donor money versus America first and, the future of America, the American people. And so who are you going to go for? Who do you believe at the end of this? And then here, Trump IRS settlement permanently blocks the IRS from auditing tax claims for President Trump and his family, Political reports. So now Trump doesn't have to get in trouble for any of the tax breaks. He's getting mad at Thomas Massie for voting against tax breaks, but then Trump is going to basically pay no taxes, right? Funny how that works. Stray cat in Turkey shows up every morning to hug the man who fed her. Kind of a happy video, I thought. Not sometimes, every single day. His shop is now packed with people who want to come and watch. So again, cute little cat. Something good to look at sometimes. Not everything is so bad. Thought this was also cool. Delta Force in the 1990s. Unlike Tier 1 operators today with sleeve tattoos and beards, these guys could pass for accountants and teachers. That's pretty crazy when you look at that. These guys are special ops in that photo. Wouldn't guess it, would you? Jewish people be like, we don't control the American government, and then spend $50 million to buy a congressional seat. I thought that was funny. Mass protesters just set fire to the entrance of a Yorkshire church. This is what happens when we let extremists run our country. We need to restore order now. Yeah, so this is happening in the UK. But we got to be careful because this could be New York City next. You know, you let in all these illegal immigrants, let in all these people, and this is the way they're going to act. You know, this is what you are seeing. This is a total war happening in the UK between the Muslims and the actual native people of Britain. But you also have to ask, Keir Starmer, he is Jewish. His mother was Jewish. And you also have to look at the fact that when you look at all of that, who is letting all of these illegal immigrants into these countries? Well, it is the Zionists. And so it is that faction. It's not all Jews that are the problem, but it is the Zionist set of the Jews. And that is what we're seeing a lot of, the Netanyahu-style government. Trump slams horrible Congressman Thomas Massie, says he circulated an old endorsement from Trump. We already looked at that. Hunter Biden is on Candace Owens naming the Jews, and you're just voting for J.D. Vance.
The left?
So I thought that was interesting. This is what Hunter Biden, again, I'm not a fan of Hunter Biden. I'm not advocating for him, but I do think it's interesting that he's coming out now and with this specific message.
DC is corrupt. Politics is corrupt.
But something's changed, Candace. It's not left or right. The DC elite of the left, they crushed my dad because he was never part of that club. He was never part of the Epstein class. You know one thing he didn't do? He didn't greenlight to turn Gaza into a Trump golf course with the maitre d' being Jared Kushner. The war in Iran that they started, that every president before him was pressured by the Israelis.
And I do think there was something about the Charlie Kirk assassination that everyone just sort of looked up.
They're the people that Charlie Kirk made. The level of disloyalty or fear, I don't know what it is. And the criticism of you for asking the questions for someone who was like a brother to you, it's like, what the F are you talking about? I listen to you and I go, right on.
Yeah. And so seriously, that was from Hunter Biden, whether or not, obviously we know Hunter Biden is not a good man, but at the end of the day, it tells you a lot. He's speaking out against the Trump government and how they've basically sold out to the state of Israel right now. Israeli reporter, Iran terror regime controls Hormuz. Trump said U.S. would have been in danger. You don't believe Trump? And then Tucker says, no, I don't believe Trump. And again, this is more about what he said here. Let's listen.
Iran terror regime that controls now also the Hormuz pathway and the terror ring that it created in the Middle East, maybe it would be even worse for any citizens in the world, not only in Israel, but also in the United States. And this is exactly what Donald Trump said. He said that the United States would have been in danger. So you don't believe Donald Trump?
I don't believe Donald Trump, and I also think as an Israeli, you should pause before using the phrase terror regime, since you live in a country that just murdered thousands of children in Gaza. We should all pull back a little bit.
A lot more.
Iran terror regime that controls now also the Hormuz.
And again, that's like Lebanon too. He forgot to mention Lebanon. That's really big that's happening. So again, this is from Nick Shirley 7 hours ago. Does it make you far right to want vetted immigration, no digital ID, lower taxes, no tier policing, free speech, pedophiles out of office, and lower cost of living? Check this video out.
Higher cost of living, Stommer out. Your sign says...
Nick Shirley!
Oh, hello.
Oh, my goodness. Hello, Nick Shirley.
Nice to meet you. Your sign says, we did not vote for open borders, digital ID, higher taxes, two-tier policing, loss of free speech, pedophiles in politics, higher cost of living, Stommer out, restore Britain. Yeah. What's your message to Keir Starmer today?
Keir Starmer's a wanker. Everything in the mandate is backtracked on. He's added things in that wasn't mandated, like digital ID. He doesn't listen to the British public. He's just had a landslide vote and he still is ignorant.
He needs to go.
He needs to stop branding hard-working Brits as far right. We just want to be heard.
And we just want to be heard, she said. Well, again, the reason I keep playing videos from the UK is because the UK is basically telling you what's going to happen in America next. Okay, everything that they're trying in the UK is what they want to bring here to the United States. And they want to have the same system. It's the same kind of system, a same Zionist-run system. Okay, as much as we like Tommy Robinson, and I like the things he says, ultimately, you know, he is a Zionist. And he's come out and admit that. So what is the real intention? You know, why was Tommy Robinson negotiating with a Syrian, spy? Okay, very interesting to think about there. And documented on photo doing it. So you got to think about all of this. But in America, we have the First Amendment, and we always must protect the First Amendment, that right to free speech, and religion. You should always be able to say what you want, because bad words can be countered by better words. Incorrect speech can be countered by correct speech. And so that's kind of the idea of the freedom of speech. You have to be able to always stand up for your rights, and you have to be able to defend that right to keep and bear arms, which the UK does not have. And because the UK is not an armed society, well, you see rapes happening every single day in this country. You see stabbings, and it's a completely different country. You see all these foreigners flooding everywhere. It's not just Muslims, but it's Pakistanis, it's Indians, it's Somalians, all these different races of people, and it is a total melting pot in the entire UK today. And a lot of the UK people will say, well, we don't mind. We are an open society and we have no problem bringing in more immigrants to our country. This is who we are as Britain. But then you see 500,000 children, little girls, have been raped by these same migrants. Okay, and these are the same migrants that are burning down churches in the UK. So that is pretty much a sign of everything that's going to come here to the United States. And mind you, the UK is doing a better job of actually protesting the issue at this current time. Our government is basically just getting... A lot of our people don't even know what's going on in the UK. A lot of our people don't even know the extent of danger that you will actually endure if you go to Paris, France, for example. And how, because of the immigration. Same thing with Norway. And, you know, where my ancestors come from, Sweden and Finland. And all these countries that used to be beautiful, all white countries. Not that it matters that it's all white, but the point is that you have this melting pot of all these different races of people, of grown military men who are going to these countries to kill and to conquer. And they say it. They say that we're coming here to conquer. We're coming here to change your people and your demographics. We're going to sleep with your women, and we are going to we're going to outbirth you. You know, we're going to have more children than you. So it's really scary to think about. This is why this issue is so important.
He's ignoring us.
How do you feel about the mass surveillance here of your government?
I feel like if you can do that to your own people, why can't you monitor more closely the people you're letting in who are abusing our women and children, who are taking taxpayers' money, who are living better lives than the people who are working really hard in this country, who live here, who are proud of where we are. We don't oppose immigration. We just don't want to have them prioritised above us. We're losing our culture.
Oh no, I definitely oppose immigration in general. Okay, I'm not like against immigrants or like any other race of people specifically, but what I'm against is an invasive group of immigrants coming to change my country, the demographics of my country, to sleep with our women and to have babies with our women. And then next thing you know, there's no more white people, there's no more Americans, no more history, no more culture, no more Christianity or Catholicism. Nope, all of it goes away. It becomes a Muslim country just like that. And not even by the will of the people, just by force and conquest. No criminal justice system, no right of law, and it's only the rights for the immigrants. And that's how fast it happens. You know, it's Elon Musk had said, what happens when you take a village of 500 people and you fill it with a group of another village of 2,000 people? Well, that group of 2,000 people takes over the majority of that smaller village of 500 people. And that quickly, that's how fast you lose your country and the demographics of them. That's how quickly it happens. This is why you cannot just allow all of these outsiders and foreigners into your country. Even if they wanted to come here legally and use the system to do it, well, maybe there needs to be a change to that system. And that's kind of my thoughts on it. So yes, illegal immigration is a massive problem all over the world, and we need to be careful because if we let it happen in America, it's going to be a dangerous place to live as an American. Okay, you have people like Byron Donalds. George Floyd was murdered. Again, as a police officer, look through the autopsy. Was he murdered? Was George Floyd really murdered? You tell me. I mean, when I look at the autopsy of George Floyd, I remember seeing methamphetamine in his system. He had ketamine in his system. He had cocaine. He had literally a bag of cocaine had dropped out of his back pocket during the altercation. And then at the end of the day, if you actually look at the unconscious neck restraint, which was the name of the subject control tactic that was used by the Officer Chavez, you look at that subject control tactic, well, and how it was done on camera, a lot of people say, oh, well, he was on his neck. And I remember in our academy, they were saying that he was on his neck. It's like, well, he wasn't, though. If you go back, that knee was on his back. And at the same time, George Floyd was fighting. He was resisting arrest. And so what this is called is excited delirium. And so this individual was not only high on drugs and amphetamines, but he was also, again, resisting and obstructing. So he was suffering from excited delirium, and then next thing you know, he probably gave himself a heart attack, as the autopsy really showed. Okay, so you look at all of this, and it's like, no, George Floyd wasn't murdered, but Byron Donalds wants to believe that that is the case. I do not like Byron Donalds as a politician at all.
You know, I think that what happened to George Floyd was an absolute tragedy, and he was murdered.
No, he wasn't.
And justice needs to be done.
He was resisting arrest. He was a criminal. He had a criminal record. And if you look at the body cam, watch it again, that knee was on his back, not his neck. And at the same time, he was resisting and obstructing, and he had amphetamines and a number of drugs in his system, according to the autopsy report. But they don't talk about that. You won't talk about that, will you, Byron Donalds?
Justice will be done.
You're not a real
But
Republican.
what we can't do, what we should never do, is riot in our streets and burn down businesses, because if we truly want
Mind you, this guy is still a Zionist, by the way. He's also a Zionist shill.
justice, we have to come together as one America. We can't be divided. We can't target the very people who serve us in our communities and who protect us in our communities.
You also say, you said in your video that you posted on Twitter, people cannot line up with the radicals, this extremist element that is breaking stuff and looting.
Listen, it's clear right now, Antifa and these other radical groups are secreting themselves into these peaceful protesters. And we see it every night now. It's peaceful during the day, and as the sun goes down, they come in with rocks, they come in with bottles, they come in with gas, and they are amplifying the pain that is existing in America today, but they're amplifying it for their own political ends. The president was right to call them out. All leaders need to call them out, and we frankly need order restored in our streets, because you cannot have a safe America. You can't have an America based upon liberty if you're not going to have safety in our streets, and we have to protect the people who want to protest safely, but we also have to protect small business owners as well. I was watching a news report last night before I went to bed about a pharmacy store in Van Nuys, California was burned out and burglarized. Well, who does that truly hurt? It hurts the senior citizens in Van Nuys who simply want to be able to wake up the next day and get the medication that's going to help with their medical conditions. You know, when you burn down a black barbershop that's just reopening and just got a PPP loan, who does that hurt? That hurts that business owner who's worked hard for many years to scrape that together.
Yeah.
When you talk about the firefighter who finally, took all his savings to build a business and it gets burned out, who does that hurt? It hurts a black firefighter. He's not somebody that perpetrated the attack against George Floyd. He was a man in America trying to.
He keeps bringing up George Floyd. Like, dude, George Floyd was a criminal. He was a career criminal, and he was anti-cop, and he was a drug addict.
Build the American dream, just trying to live. And so we have to have some real sense and common sense come to our communities. What we cannot do is fall into the violence and hate that these radical groups want this country to descend into. We have to stand up for what's right and what's just here in America.
Yeah, like Zionism, like you constantly are shilling for. All right, Byron Donalds, get out of here, bro. Elon Musk, what is the best possible future? The question is much harder to answer than it may seem. I thought this was kind of a weird answer from Elon Musk. Listen to this. He basically says that not everybody wants peace. You got to have a little bit of conflict. And I somewhat agree with this, but I also think it's kind of a crazy statement coming from the richest, most powerful man on earth.
Let's say you're praying to God and you ask for a given future. What future do you want God to give you? And probably a future where there's amazing abundance for all, where everybody has incredible medical care, and we have this, and in fact, where say anything can be cured, where no one is hungry, and people are free to do what they would like. I think that's probably the best future.
And peace and love.
Well, yeah. I mean, always worry about, like, if you wish for something, does it actually become some dystopian version of that? But certainly love. I mean, I think we want a future with
He's
love.
like back and forth.
Seems like
See, if you read Elon Musk's biography by Walter Isaacson, you will learn that Elon, as a kid, was a hyper strategist. He loved playing strategy games, and he loved war. He was always interested in war. If you really know Elon, he loves war. He loves conflict. He's really no different than Trump. They love war. They love conflict. If you understand the psychographics of this man, it's so hard for him to answer this, because this is a dude his entire life who is obsessed with the idea of fighting and war.
No-brainer. Peace is an interesting one because, sometimes the price for complete peace may be too high, because complete peace may require too much suppression of the people. So
that's true, though.
Peace to some degree, but not completely. Ideally, there's not like a large-scale war, of course. But, you have to think about these questions kind of deeply. Do you want a world where there's no conflict? But how do you achieve a world of no conflict at all without some form of suppression? So my guess is probably people would want a future with some conflict, not total peace, but not a serious war, perhaps.
And I think what Elon's really saying here is, like, if you want to have an independent, free country, and in the times that your government becomes a tyrannical one, let's say Agenda 2030 that we all know about. They want to put you in a little pod. You will own nothing and be happy. You will eat the bugs, right? Klaus Schwab, end quote. Elon Musk is basically saying there needs to be room for conflict in order to fight back against those kind of things. There needs to be revolution. There needs to be excellence. There needs to be legendary competition and all of these things. There does need to be a little bit of conflict. And so I understand what Elon's saying, but I think to the average person, I think it would come off wrong for sure. But still a good statement. Again, this was 7 hours ago. Israel built 2 secret military bases in Iraq, not one like we thought. What are your thoughts on this? So this is Alex Barnicoat. Give him a follow.
Breaking news. Israel built 2 secret military bases in Iraq during the war. Not just one like we thought. And new intelligence confirms that Israel killed at least 1 militant and 1 civilian in an airstrike to make sure that the base's location in Iraq didn't get exposed. Now, the first Israeli base in Iraq was built at the end of 2024. So nearly 2 years it went without being found. And then the second base was built in the later stages of 2025, last year. And so Israel was planning the attacks on Iran for years, not simply making a last-minute decision like some of us thought. But that would also suggest that Israel is now determined to go back to war with Iran and fight a long-term war, based on how long they've been planning this for. Now, a week ago, we got the report that Israel had built a military base in Iraq during the war. But a week later, we have a lot more information now. And that is, Israel built 2 bases, and they've been building them for years, not just weeks, like we might have thought. And so this would really suggest that Israel is preparing for something long-term. They wouldn't put this much energy into something that just lasts 6 weeks. And so it would suggest the war is going to restart, and to be honest with you, I think it will. And so if it does, as usual, I'll keep you up to date. So leave me a follow for some more global news like this that you won't find anywhere else.
Again, that was Alex Barnicoat. Give him a follow. But all of that is very interesting when you see it. Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich threatens to declare war on the entire world and destroy everything if an arrest warrant is issued on him. He declares himself and Netanyahu's government above the law and says war crime accusations do not apply to them. And in the face of the declaration of war, we will respond with war. I promise all of you, this is only the beginning.
On a personal level, they do. Last night, I was informed that the criminal prosecutor of the anti-Semitic court in The Hague submitted a secret request for an international arrest warrant against me. This request joins the unprecedented arrest warrants issued against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. The clumsy attempt to force upon us a policy of security suicide through sanctions and arrest warrants will not succeed. On a personal level, they do not intimidate me. I am willing to pay personal prices in order to serve my people. If I am required to pay such a price, I do so proudly and with my head held high. But on the national level, they are not harming Benjamin Netanyahu or Bezalel Smotrich personally. They are trying to harm us as the Prime Minister and Finance Minister of the State of Israel. The issuance of arrest warrants against the Prime Minister is a declaration of war. The issuance of arrest warrants against the Defense Minister and Finance Minister is a declaration of war. And in the face of a declaration of war, we will respond with war.
Well, we will rise and we will go to war with you first and we will destroy you first, Israel. And we will take your own motto and use it against you. Quite honestly, that is what is going to happen and that's what's going to be done in this future.
Palestinian Authority has started a war and it will get a war. From today onward, every economic or other target within my power to harm, under my authority as Finance Minister and as a Minister in the Defense Ministry, will be targeted. Not talk and gimmicks, actions. I hereby announce the first target that will be struck. Immediately after finishing my remarks here, I will sign an order to evacuate Khan al-Ahmar on my authority as a minister in the Defense Ministry. I promise all our enemies, this is only the beginning.
War it is. But who declared war first? Israel declared war first. And it's something that we should all remember. Every time they say these things, never forget it. Remember it in the timeline. Archive it on X. Remember what they said. Save the videos to a file because they will always try to lie and say that everybody else started the war. Never forget how World War II really went down. Representative Thomas Massie exposes that his AIPAC-funded opponent and Washington at large are nothing more than vassals of Zionist-run chatbots.
In fact, it wasn't even something an aide or speech. Take a listen to this.
I stand here today because I am planning to reintroduce the United States-Israel Artificial Intelligence Center Act.
When Congressman Jake Auchincloss delivered a speech on the House floor Wednesday, it wasn't something he wrote. In fact, it wasn't even something an aide or speechwriter came up with. This speech was written by the online artificial intelligence chatbot, ChatGPT.
It's a bunch of congressmen waiting in line to give speeches, and they were all holding pieces of paper. They were all reading their speeches. And I know what's happened. Some junior staffer has asked ChatGPT to, in the voice of, Joe Smith from, Nebraska, and make it sound like it's Karen, right? So what I realized was you could almost just replace the congressman now with AI. The guy running against me did a social media post, and he forgot to take off the AI header.
Oh my God.
And it said, here's a post in your usual folksy, concerned tone about constituents. Like this one looks like you care.
And then the folksy tone, right? He made that as a prompt.
And so we caught him. I screen captured it, and I just embarrassed him. So what did he do? Did he take it down and write another post? No, he took it down, took the AI header off, and put it back up. The same AI post.
That's how the game is being played today. AI is already taking over, and they're apparently better and more competent than our congressmen. This is a pretty sad story. 19-year-old girl died after a man with 4 prior arrests, including for assaulting women, fired a shotgun through her front door in broad daylight. Hours later, he came back and murdered her outside her own home. Her name was Kamira Tidwell. She was just 19 years old. Doorbell video shows Sean Hubbard, 34, of Clover, North Carolina, calmly walking up to Kamira's home, and blasting a shotgun through the screen door in broad daylight. The family called the police. The police searched for him, but could not find him. He came back that night and murdered Kamira outside of her own home. This was the 3rd attack on her home in 5 days. Nobody did anything. Law enforcement said, well, he's a scholar. He's a young man who's trying to clean up his life. Just let him do this to you. And now she's dead. And so this is what happens when there is no law and order, when there is no criminal justice left in the system, and when those who essentially are innocent victims, they are treated as the criminals, and the criminals are given more sympathy than the victims, which is true evil, and it is the most heinous thing that happens in a society. That is the signs of a collapsing society. Very sad. Pray for Kamira's family. An American drone was just shot down whilst over Yemen. What are your thoughts on this? That was big. Again, looking through some of this, breaking a national plan to immensely surge deportation of migrants in Europe has just passed the European Parliament, a major blow to the elite leftists who wanted a third world to destroy the West. And she's like so unhappy about it. Traitors to their own country. Now these people, though, the people you hear clapping are the heroes, obviously. Getting rid of the illegal immigration. And then you have the parliamentary head.
Many votes to go through, guys.
She's just like, shut up. You anti-immigration native Europeans. Why don't you want more low IQ? Why don't you want more low IQ immigrants coming to your country to rape everybody and just destroy your economies? Why don't you want that? So again, that was just a lot of the news from today. That's pretty much all we're going to cover. It would have been a more organized show, but I totally accidentally cleared out of all of my tabs that I had lined up. So we're going to call it that for a night. So, but before we do, I guess we'll check and see if there's any new news in the breaking news real quick. Again, James Fishback. I like him. Looks like we covered a lot of this, though. Democracy is a delusion. The seat was bought and paid for by AIPAC. Representative Thomas Massie has been unseated by AIPAC's Ed Gallerin in what is now the most expensive House primary in U.S. history. So again, the Zionists have won, apparently. Is that true? Yeah, Kentucky U.S. House Republican primary, Ed Gallerin. So yes, AIPAC has won because of their money. Not because of the American people, but because, again, corporations, billionaires, and Israel almost always get their way, and you'll almost never hear of a U.S. politician running and getting big money out of politics and governance outside of Bernie Sanders. Again, look at the people. So this is definitely, again, AIPAC money destroying the United States government. AIPAC is winning, and this will be the story that nobody could defeat Donald Trump. Donald Trump has all of the power.
Sooner, but I had to call my opponent and concede, and it took a while to find Ed Gallerin in Tel Aviv.
Seriously. Oh, that's not good for Kentucky. Kentucky is now a Zionist state. For anybody watching, Kentucky will now be controlled by the Jews, and that is just the way the cookie crumbles in America these days. But the media will say that Donald Trump is king.
I have called and conceded the race. We've been honorable the whole time, and we're going to stay that way. I would have.
So very sad, very unfortunate news. Thomas Massie has lost the race against Ed Gallerin, and not going so hot. Not going so hot. So we'll be back tomorrow to talk a little bit more about that. Thanks for tuning in, and be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe. But at the end of the day, I got nothing else. Stay prudent, stay powerful, and stay wealthy.